Hello, and welcome back to the Badland build. It's been a while since I've produced any video on my build because of the typical Florida hot summer. It was just cooking outside, which is normal, especially for Florida, humidity and all that fun stuff. So we didn't make much progress during that time, but back at it. It's time to get going. So today what we're going to play with is the rudder, the elevator, and the horizontal stabilizer, and the bump stops for the rudder. And I'll show you where I screwed up royal on that and what I did to fix it, just to give you some ideas that nothing is insurmountable. You can always fix stuff that you kind of mess up, and I promised to do that. So here's my first major one. So let's get going on this. This is the horizontal stabilizer. It has two tabs sticking off from it right in the center, one at the top, one at the bottom. Those need to be facing down as you slide the horizontal stabilizer in between the two support bars on the vertical stabilizer, and that's back where the rudder goes. And you'll see the two tabs that are almost identical, and match them up because that's where the bolts are going to go to hold this piece in. Now it's your choice whether you mount the horizontal stabilizer tab in front or in back of the rear tab on the plane itself. But let me show you the difference here. Now the front tab for the horizontal stabilizer bar will go through, the bolt will go through that support bar right there that's right next to it, just to the left. And that will either put your gap between your two tabs in the back or to the front, and that's something that you're going to have to decide on yourself. This is the front part of the horizontal stabilizer mount, and you can see that the bolt that I put in there, it's pretty long. It's much longer than it needs to be, and there's no threads in part of it that is past the actual mount itself, which means I'm going to have to put a lot of washers in there to make this fit right, make that bolt hold this in place. I don't like that idea. And then looking at the back, you can see that I'm going to have to move those washers to the back, so this tab on the back horizontal portion that mounts it isn't bending either one of those two tabs towards each other. And then look at the bolt. The bolt's too short. As soon as I put a nut on there, the nut's going to be right at the end of the threads, and that's just not enough of a safety margin. So I will end up swapping those two bolts and see how that works out. One of the things I failed to mention at the beginning of all of this is get yourself some good sawhorses. I got these from Harbor Freight. They're not the El Cheapos. They are kind of expensive, but they work fantastically. Adjustable legs in every different direction you can think of, and they've definitely come in very, very handy. And next we're going to install the elevator itself. You can see that kind of V section in the center there. The very top of it, we'll call that the open end or the back of the elevator. The other part, of course, is the front. And let's get this thing installed. It's pretty straightforward. Now the elevator will lay upside down. You can see that little bar that's there right on top of the sawhorse that's sticking up. So that's actually the control for the elevator. It's going to be facing upwards. And as you can see, the V towards the back is facing towards the front of the plane. So the elevator slides in there upside down into the same exact location where the horizontal stabilizer is at. Now that the elevator is in place, all you do is rotate it backwards, flip it over basically, so that that arm is now pointing down instead of up, and let the sawhorses support the elevator. Now just slide the three hinges into place and throw the pins in them. Do not put the cotter keys in yet. You're going to have to tear this all down eventually. So just slide the pins in there. And you may have to clean out the inside of the tubes for the pins to slide in properly. They also may be a little bit stiff trying to get them through. That just happens because of welding and warping because of welding. So, but they do go in pretty easily, and that's all there is to the elevator. It's in. Well, now we get into the fun part and my screw up. So let's get the rudder installed, and then I'll show you where it really gets kind of goofy. So the rudder has two hinges, top and bottom one. Go ahead and hang them on the vertical stabilizer. There we go. above the actual hinges as shown in this picture and the next picture. You're doing this because there's a bump stop that we've got to set up so that the rudder does not overextend itself into the side of the elevator, which would be bad. Okay, so here's the right bump stop. You see the silver piece of pipe sticking out there at kind of in a 45-degree angle, and then right above that is a black bar with a hole in it. I'm not talking about the little one down that's up front that's kind of bent. I'm talking about the straight one that's closer to the wheel. Those two components make your bump stop, meaning that when your rudder turns, the large black bar is going to run into that silver one below. Yours is probably going to be a different color because it's 4160. This is just titanium, so it's a little easier to see. But that's what's going to run into it and stop it from exceeding the limits to where the rudder actually rams itself into that V section of the elevator, which would be a bad thing. Now, the left side has the same exact thing, so whatever we do to the right, it's going to be pretty much identical process to do on the left. So here what I've got is the very top hinge is pinned in correctly, but as you can see, the pins coming off of the back of the plane are hitting the black bar there, which doesn't allow you to get the hinge far enough in to be able to connect it in. And that's kind of what it's supposed to do, but when the hinge is in place. So what we have to do is I'm going to have to cut these silver pieces down. And like I say, yours may be a different color, doesn't matter. You have to cut them down to allow the hinge to be able to be connected and for that rudder to be able to move left and right far enough, about 30 degrees according to the manual, to change the plane's direction and then bump into that piece of metal, the pins coming out from the plane, so that it doesn't exceed 30 degrees and start ramming itself into the elevator. And just a precautionary, you're not cutting that black bar. It's going to be metal on yours, whatever color you paint it. Mine is black. I painted it black. But you're not cutting that bar that has the holes in it. You're cutting the pins on the plane. Now, in this picture I'm showing, if the plane was in a left turn and the rudder was moved over to the left, you can see where the elevator is and where the rudder is and how close they come together. You need about 3/4 of an inch or more of space between those two to make sure they don't interfere with each other. Now, if you look down, let's zoom in on the actual bump stop, you can see just how much of that pin I'm going to have to cut off to make sure that the black pin or the black bar, when it hits the pin, it stops that elevator from going any further left. Now you can try with a protractor. The manual says you can use a protractor to set up your 30-degree angle left and right. It didn't work out too well for me. I just had a lot of problems with it, so I went with the other method of just making sure that I was more than 3/4 of an inch away from the elevator, and that seemed to work out a lot better, but I still screwed up on it. So to make the cutting marks on the pins that I need to cut, I went ahead and set up the rudder back up above the hinge points so that I could still move it left and right fully over the bump stop, the silver bump stop there. And that would allow me to mark on the silver bump stop where I needed to cut it. And this came from one of the other builders, and it worked for him. So and it actually worked for me too. I just need to measure better, but we'll get to that. So my apologies for the blurriness here, but I figured, you know what, I'm just going to measure 3/4 to an inch off of the rudder, off of the elevator, the farthest piece, point sticking out, and then bring the rudder over to it, and that should be able to give me a mark to where I need to cut. So I taped the ruler onto the elevator, and I also taped another ruler onto the rudder that would act kind of like the Oratex material. That's where Oratex is going to be covering the rudder. And then I bumped them together, and that should give me my ability to mark the pin below and cut it, and everything should be good, right? No. So here's my rudder, fully right, 30 degrees, or about 3/4 of an inch away from the elevator. and I should be able to cut right where that blue tape is, which is what I did. I thought this would work. I did both sides this way. So I pulled the rudder off, moved the elevator up so it was out of the way, made my cuts. Everything looked good. You can see the little black pen marks I've got on there. I used a Sharpie to mark where the tape wasn't and did my cuts. Thought everything was going to be great. So I put the rudder back on, put it in the correct hinge points where it's supposed to be, turned it to the right, and holy crap, it's like 5 inches away from the elevator. What the heck happened? Now, the bump stop is working up in the upper, or the top of the picture. You can see the two pieces of metal are touching. So the bump stop did work. It's just somehow I got the measurement way off. So here's where I made my big screw up. I figured that I probably didn't take into account the black bar that's bumping into the bump stop, and that I didn't put that in my calculations or my thinking at all. And so I measured it, and I cut exactly that amount off of the silver bump stops, and that just made it worse. So I was so angry because of what I had done. I didn't even take pictures, but here's an explanation. Now the rudder actually went too far and was touching the elevator, or would have been touching the elevator. So bad news on that. So what do? Well, it actually was a pretty simple solution. These are tubes, which means they're hollow, which means that if you put the right tap into it, you might be able to put threads in it. And sure enough, I used a 5/16 18 thread tapped both of them, and turned out with this. One of our other forum members had actually mentioned something about this, and I remembered it, and it was like, maybe I can do it. And sure enough, it worked. And now the rudder is within its left and right limits. It is adjustable, which is really nice. I just back the screw out a little bit or put it in a little further as needed. I will definitely Loctite these, being that the only pressure on them is the rudder, and that's only if I kick it hard right or hard left. The Loctite should hold without a problem. But it worked, and it just goes to show you can fix screw-ups. So if you make a mistake while you're building your plane, don't worry about it. Just think it through. You'll figure it out. Okay, so now that this part's done, I was going to include the swaging. And what the heck is swaging? I'll show you that in a second here. I was going to include that, but it got hot, and unfortunately we're going through a short heat spell here in Florida, and I'll get to the swaging on the next one, and that's going to be interesting, putting the fly wires on this thing. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you're enjoying the series on building this airplane. I've got some friends coming up. We're going to be getting together at the Ultralight Fly-In in Hodges a weekend away, I guess. It's coming up quick. And I'll try and get some more videos up as soon as I can, see if I can get the swaging up next week. Depends on the heat. I just don't like to work out in the heat here in Florida. It's pretty warm, but should have a lot of fun, and hopefully no more of these screw-ups. This was a good one. At least it was on a small part, so that was good. Anyway, take care, and thanks again for checking out my videos.